Welcome back. And for this last section, the first topic we're going to talk about is being a town councillor. The government's plans are to try and bring the decision making further down the chain through the councils, the district, the counties, and of course the town councils. So it seems highly sensible to ask our town councillor here this evening what being a councillor means. Why do they do it? Mike, what does being a town councillor mean to you?
It's a very good question, Tony. It's probably 98% frustration. You get a lot of stick because no matter that 90% of the people agree with you, 10% of them never do, and they're the ones who will make their voice heard. It can also be extremely rewarding in that you are there doing a job because you care about the town in which you live, and hopefully you have networks of people that feed information into you such that you are able to represent them in a fair way. And I guess, why does one become a town councillor? I guess probably because one has, firstly, the time to give to it, and secondly, the confidence to be able to stand up and speak up and to debate in chamber and to put your views over.
And when you come to as local as Thame, for example, as a town, although it seems many of the councillors are there as a particular party member, a Conservative or a Labour, but at this kind of level, does party politics come into it at all? Not
at all. In some town councils it will. In Thame, it certainly doesn't. And yes, we do have people, including myself, who stand with the party label, but there's no pre-meetings before councillors, there's no whips, we argue with each other in chamber. Standing for a party is more really a case of saying, well, look, this is who I am. I believe in a free enterprise economy. I believe in individual responsibility and accountability. So it's just giving the people an idea of what sort of person they're electing rather than a specific political agenda.
Amy, have you ever thought of going into local politics? Or?
Goodness, well, I don't know if I would be much of a politician. My current reference points are the House of Cards television show, if you've been watching that, and maybe Thame Council is just like that. I don't think I'm ready for that amount of pressure. Hopefully it's not quite as stressful and
I think not.
Dangerous.
Very occasionally, but mostly not.
And again, what was it that drew you in? When did you start?
I started as town councillor 8 years ago. It was really a case that the kids had grown up, they'd left school, they'd gone off to university. It was time to put something back. And people will often comment that throughout local government we need more younger people involved. You don't get them because they're bringing up families, because they have careers. It's really once people begin to shed those responsibilities that they have the time and will find the time to put something back.
Do you think anything could be adjusted that would encourage people who are trying to juggle work or children into it?
I think they've got to be motivated first, and if they're motivated to do it, they will find a way to do it.
What sort of things should be devolved down from central government and more towards district and town?
Sure. Well, firstly, I think devolution or localism, and I'm a great fan of localism, should really work all the way through the system. So we will be talking about ideally devolving powers from Brussels back to Westminster, from Westminster out to the regions, from the regions out to the counties, and on down to the towns and the parishes. So it's got to work through the whole system, but the point is to bring the decisions closer to the people that they're going to affect, rather than having them made in some ivory tower somewhere else. Now, in the case of a town or a parish council, Thame has already taken some initiative in producing, well, being the first really to produce its own neighbourhood plan. So we've taken some control over planning decisions within the town. We would like very much, the law doesn't allow the powers at the moment, we would like very much to take on responsibility for on-street parking. We have responsibility for car parks, but to be able to control the street parking within the town, because it's not being effectively controlled at the moment. And there are other things like that, where there are powers that exist at the next tier of local government that could be done equally well or perhaps even better at a more local level.
Amy, what do you think about what kind of powers would you like to see the town do? Anything come to mind?
Oh, well, I'm
From the point of
being
view
a
of being a
mum at the
GP?
moment. Actually, is the thing. So it's all about playgrounds and parking. I think you're right, because when you have a baby, the thought of having to move from your parking spot at a certain point that's a work in itself. So I suppose those are the things that are dear to my heart at the moment. But you're right. Moving around the country, general practice is really different everywhere you go, and there won't be one solution for everywhere, and it must be very much the same for almost everything you're dealing with, that Tame is unique and we need to do something that fits.
I'd go one further. I'd say Tame is special.
Oh, of course. But other people might be upset.
Of course. Well, they think that where they live is special too. Yes, of course.
That's true.
Yes, Tame is special in its own unique way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's move on to another couple of surveys. There was another survey which asked people what were their favourite smells, their favourite aromas, and some are fairly obvious perhaps. Many of them were food-based. The top one, in fact, was freshly baked bread. Number 2 was bacon. Number 3 was freshly cut grass. So these are the sort of aromas that people think are just very, very special. So what about my guests today? Amy?
For me, I think there are a couple of holiday ones. One is a particular sun cream, whatever one you've used from when you were tiny, that just is like a potted version of all your holidays sewn up together. And the other one is that funny, different smell you get when you walk out of an aeroplane on holiday. And you can't put your finger on it, but you know you're not in the UK anymore. It smells different, and this is it. This is the beginning of a holiday.
Sounds good. Mike, what's yours?
I've had some funny smells getting out of aeroplanes in different places.
That's a good point.
The best ones have got to be wine-related, Tony. Of course they have. I mean, the depth of a good Cabernet Sauvignon, the oakness of a good Chardonnay, even the ice cream soda aroma of a good Riesling dessert wine. Absolutely superb. But one that I think is a little bit special, my sense of smell isn't as good as it was, but one I particularly remember is probably best described as ozone. The smell of the air after a thunderstorm.
Yeah. Well, there were some fairly bizarre entries in the list. For example, petrol. Petrol came in at 36. Would either of you think petrol is a good smell?
Well,
I think it's awful, I have to say. Matches, new carpets, any of those?
Not really, not really. I do remember my father when we were kids, when we were driving through the country, as we passed a farmyard, he'd wind the window down and take a deep breath. Farmyard smells.
wow, I imagine that was popular with you guys.
I think we've probably all done it to our kids. You just get used to it. You know, there's something about connection with nature, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we can't. If we haven't got our sense of smell, we really would be suffering severely, wouldn't we? Really?
And not tasting things, as you said, with wine, as well as every food. It's
Our
all
smell
about
and
the
taste are
smell
so closely related.
Yes.
Well, let's move on. There was an article in the press recently about the group called PETA, which I gather stands for People for Ethical Treatment of Animals. They were objecting to the name of a pub, which was called the Fighting Cocks. Is this taking things a bit too far?
Absolutely outrageous. What is wrong with a good old-fashioned pub name? They're not trying to glorify the blood sports. It's not trying to persuade people to take up cockfighting again. How dare they try and sanitise our heritage and our history according to a modern politically correct agenda?
Amy?
I can have sympathy in that I know that they want to keep their agenda seen and visible, and that this perhaps is a way, it's got us talking this evening. And I must admit that you can seem to go years and months without hearing much about animal rights, so maybe they've done their job, but then I probably lean to your opinion of thinking that actually changing the pub name is probably a step too far.
Don't you think that if they want to promote the ethical treatment of animals, not many of us would argue with that for a second, but if you begin to go to the level of complaining about a pub sign, doesn't that lessen your main purpose?
I think it makes them a laughingstock, yes, rather than their real agenda being taken seriously. It just puts them in a very different box for me.
Amy?
Well, there's a bit of me that's feeling sceptical, like you about the science papers earlier, that
Yeah.
I'm worried we've got a little chunk out of context, but that maybe they've got a fantastic story that explains why they're getting so upset about the pub sign. I kind of hope so, that we've not got the full gist of things, because you're right, it otherwise seems perhaps a little minor, but maybe there's more to it.
Well, pub signs, I think, like you say, Mike, are a part of our heritage, and the traditional ones are great. I remember many years ago, Tony Hancock, in one of his sketches, wanted a pub. He wanted to find a pub called the Grip and Hold All. And I thought that was brilliant, and I've been looking for one ever since, never found it, of course. Any pub signs that you've come across that you sort of think, no, that's the good name for a pub?
I have read about one in Ambleside called the Drunken Duck, which isn't that amazing a name in itself, but apparently comes from a story of the pub owner seeing a number of ducks lying in her back garden and assuming they were all dead and plucking the poor things, only to realise that they were still alive because they were just drunk from a leaking beer barrel. And apparently she was so mortified that she knitted them all tiny little jumpers to cover up their naked plucked bodies. Again, I'm not entirely sure about the truth of this tale, but I think it's a good reason for a pub sign.
It's a good story.
It's certainly a good story. Mike, have you got one?
Yeah, well, believe it or not, there's a pub near Portsmouth called the Jolly Taxpayer. Now, how ridiculous can you get? But a couple, from my experience with historical connections, there's a pub that I used to use when I was younger near Warwick called The Case is Altered, which I think it dates back to a
Jacobean play of some...
It is, around 1620-ish. It is a stage play. And another one, actually a wine bar rather than a pub, but a place I used to frequent in Southwark called the Boot and Flogger, which I understand that Boot and Flogger was a device for putting a cork into a wine bottle.
Okay, so not as violent as it sounds.
Oh, no.
Okay, believing.
Well, there was the pub, the very famous and ancient pub in Nottingham, isn't there? The old Trip to Jerusalem. They call it Ye Old Trip to Jerusalem. It's a tiny pub, but everybody seems to know it. You give yourself a good pub name, and it surely makes the people come in.
That's true.
We have a fairly unusual one in Tame. We have the James Figg.
We do.
And Jimmy Figg was a prize boxer, bare knuckle fighter, and is remembered.
Did he live in Tame?
He lived in Tame. There's a blue plaque to him in Tame, and a pub named after him.
Good. One last little topic. There was a survey done by the Oxford University Press, so very locally, about analysing the children's stories that had been submitted, over 120,000 of them. And it introduced a new word, or rather the children's word of the year was hashtag. Now, as a fairly ancient person, I find that pretty awful. But what do you think? Have we simply got to accept these sort of new words?
Of course we have. Kids have always had their own language. They've always... Well, firstly, they're ahead of us technologically. I think I know what hashtag stands for, but I don't tweet. So I'm not using it ever, but it is part of the world they live in, the technology they're using, and it's inevitably going to enter their language. But we all, as kids, we invented our own language, our own slang, our own code words, so that we could have a conversation without our parents knowing what we're up to. And that is part of the growing up process. They have every right to do that, and we should not encourage them, but we certainly shouldn't discourage them.
Amy, what's your thinking on it?
Well, my current thing that I'm obsessed with, Shakespeare, he was a big fan of new words, joining words, creating words, so I think he would be very proud.
It's been going on for a very long time.
It's not a new thing.
Good. That's lovely. Thank you very much. There, I think we have to leave it. So that's the end of the show for this evening. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, do please get in touch with us. Email us at talk@that'soxford.com or tweet us at that'soxfordtv. So thanks for watching. Hopefully see you again soon. Goodbye to you.